This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Well, everybody, welcome to tonight's show, Ingles on the Beat. It's Mike Griffith here, and really excited about tonight's show. Going to talk a lot about the college football playoffs. Want to recap my thoughts on Georgia's 63-3 win. And on our second segment, Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, is going to join me. We're going to talk about some of the Georgia guys that are headed down there, what their draft grades look like, maybe some other guys on the radar. But I got to start with 63-3. I've been very outspoken on this, and I don't mind throwing my opinions out there and ruffling some feathers, and you all know that. But to me, the way Georgia and Florida State approach this game, this is instant classic stuff in the sense of opt-in versus opt-out culture. This is the case study for where college football is at. This is the case study for how people want their programs to be and how some programs actually are. And if you're a Georgia fan, you're going to like it because your team is on the right side of this equation. You had a team full of guys that wanted to play for each other, that wanted to finish the season, that handled adversity the right way, right? Look, we all get dealt adversity at times in our jobs and our lives, and it's really not a matter of whether or not you're going to get dealt adversity. At some point, you're going to get knocked on your butt. At some point, you're going to be wronged and things aren't going to go your way, and it's just not going to be fair. I feel like I'm talking to a group of third graders here, but I got to make this point. We've really got to break this down into elementary code because believe it or not, there's some people that are going, oh no, we understand those poor kids, their feelings were hurt, so they quit, and that's okay. You know what? Not okay. Not okay. Not how the country was built. Not how champions are made. Not what the growth and the maturity and the team building and all those talks right out the window. And the head coach having to make these excuses. I felt bad for Mike Norvell. He doesn't believe what he's saying. He's not proud of these guys that quit, but that's what he's got to say because he's the coach. He just has to get through it. It's like having that bad stomach ache. You just want it to go away, but there's going to be a process involved and it's not going to be pleasurable. Right? And that's what that was for Florida. They just wanted to get – and listen, Kirby Smart, Kirby didn't run the score up. He pulled his starting quarterback at halftime. He said, you know what, Carson Beck, you've had one hell of a season, but I can't let you break Stetson Bennett's single-season record for passing. I've got to pull Carson Beck. Can't even get him through three quarters, which is usually the measure. Usually you at least let your starter go three quarters. But it was already 42-3. So Kirby said, sorry, Carson, you can't have that single season passing record. It's going to have to wait for next year. I'm going to put in my number 2. Then I'm going to put in my number 3 Muschamp. And then I've got a confession to make. And I hate to make this confession because it makes me feel stupid. But shame on me. But I'd never heard of the fourth quarterback that they used. I didn't know this guy. I can't even tell you his name right now. They played a guy that I'd never heard of, and I cover this team every day. That's never been talked about by anybody. If I would have bumped into this guy in person and he told me he played for Georgia, I'd have needed some proof. They played 4 quarterbacks, 2 guys that had never taken a snap to keep the score down. So I don't want to hear any Florida State complaining. I don't want to hear anybody saying that Kirby Smart should apologize. And Kirby saying that it needed to be fixed. That's a nice way of saying that a lot of these other programs don't know what they're doing and don't have their kids bought in. That's what needs to be fixed. If I was a Florida State booster, and I don't think I could be a booster for any sport because I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of money, number one. And number two, if I did, I'd probably put it into my own kids' trust. But if I was a booster that had hundreds of thousands of dollars to throw into a program for somebody else, I don't think I could do it if kids wouldn't play in the bowl game and represent the university. I don't think I could do that. But Georgia, on the other hand, made a lot of people proud. Their players made a lot of people proud by opting in, by pulling together, right? And that was important. And it represented what Kirby Smart has built at Georgia. Okay. Missouri did too. Missouri did it. Everybody opted in. Everybody played in that game. I just think it said so much for the University of Georgia and the way those players feel about their fans and the way the fans feel about the players. When Kirby was given the mic, and you may not know this, but right after the game, I don't know if his speech to the first thing he did was thank the Georgia fans that were there. The first things he did was thank the Georgia fans that followed his program. That's the first thing he did. When they said, what did this say? He said, it says a lot about these people that support Georgia football. This relationship that Georgia fans have with their football program is huge. And it happens a few, like I said, Missouri was all in. They had that special season. But for Kirby, this has become the standard. This has become the norm. This is why Georgia won 29 games in a row. This is how Georgia won back-to-back national championships, with this level of commitment, with these sort of leaders. Kendall Milton, Cedric Van Pran, Kamari Lassiter. These are the guys that were at the very forefront of, we're going to opt in. We're going to play this game. We are going to finish what we started. The entire Georgia football team was at the finish line in Miami. Brock Bowers and Amarius Mims were on hand. They started together. They finished together. And Kirby kind of told us earlier in the week, I don't think people talk enough about finishing. He said that. Georgia finished. That says everything. That's what it's really all about. Take the wins and the losses away, it's really all about teaching people to deal with adversity and finish strong together and play for something bigger than yourself. That's what Georgia did. I mean, that's why people go, that game right there. I said, no, that game was beautiful. That game says everything. That game says right and wrong. One program where people are bought in to their program, to their teammates, to their institution, their coaches, their fans, and another program that's not. Hey, if it's not good for me, I'm out. And left teammates behind. Remember when Kendall Milton said after the SEC championship game, I'm not going to abandon my brothers. I'm going to play. Van Pran caught a whiff of that. He goes, the plan is to play. He heard Kendall. He's in. And then it just happened. The leaders set the mold. And Georgia needed that. Let's be honest. Last offseason was very challenging for the University of Georgia. I don't need to repeat it. It's been very well documented. It was an extremely difficult offseason for the University of Georgia. There were people that raised a lot of questions about this team and this leadership. They responded. They responded, and they validated themselves, and they showed people who and what Georgia football is. And this offseason, Georgia's going to go into it with a lot of momentum. And a lot of people, that was the most watched Orange Bowl in like 7 years. A lot of people were tuned in, and they got to see a classy Georgia program. They didn't see anybody running it up. They didn't see any taunting. They didn't see any inappropriate celebrating. They didn't see a coach, stepping on the gas and putting 80 or 90 points on the board. And let's be honest, if Kirby wanted to score 80 or 90, they could have done it. If he wanted to make a statement, a really loud statement, he could have done it. But the statement he made was class, was first class, was giving the kids an opportunity to play. Third, fourth string guys, everybody on the roster go in the game. Everybody had an opportunity. And play hard, because this is your chance. I don't think people realize how hard these guys work year-round for these 12, 13, 14 opportunities to get on the field on Saturday. I mean, we're talking, 20 hours a week preparation as a team, but their own treatment, their own training, their own meetings. Cedric Van Pran's calling meetings off of the clock with players. Hey, get in here. We're going to get ready for this game. This is what Georgia does. And Kirby said that. He said, at Georgia, the job's never done. He said, maybe some places they get to this point, this time. There's one way to do it, and it's all out. And why wouldn't you want to be your best and apply yourself? This is what makes Kirby Smart special. And people say, you cover Georgia, so that's a no. I've been critical. There's been times I've been critical of Kirby. There's things I've second-guessed over the last 7 years. But when he does it right, and let me tell you, Kirby got this one right, man. And the way Georgia handled this, I know he's so proud of them. I know the entire university is so proud of these football players and the way they handled this situation, because it didn't have to. They could have opted out. They could have said, you know what? We won 29 games in a row. How do we go from number 1 to number 6? Nobody does that. Steve Spurrier told me that. Spurrier told me, I was having a conversation with 2 weeks ago. He goes, now, wait a minute. These guys win 29 in a row. They lose one game by 3 points, and they drop down to number 6. He said, I don't think I've ever seen that. That's Steve Spurrier taking up for Georgia, folks. So Georgia had a case. Kirby made his case, but all the talk, well, poor Florida State, poor this, poor that. Don't you feel sorry for? Somebody said to Mike Norvell, or somebody asked Kirby, aren't you worried about going into a hornet's nest when you play Florida State? Kirby said, we got a hornet's nest right here. And they did, and they played like it with passion. I was impressed with Carson. Impressed when Carson came back. Impressed when Carson said he can make huge improvements before next year, right? I'm going to accentuate this point later, but I had a quick take I got to share with you. I know there's some Georgia fans, and nobody's ever happy. There's always a 10% that's never going to be happy. I get that. But this Mike Bobo stuff is so misguided. I'm going to throw this at you real quick. I'm going to tell you that Georgia dropped off on every position offensively from last year to this year, okay? I'm going to tell you that sixth-year Stetson Bennett was better than first-year Carson Beck because of his ability to make plays with his feet, right? Now, if Carson had had a better supporting cast, then maybe that wouldn't be the case because I think Carson's every bit as talented, and I agree with Kirby that Georgia could have won a national title with Carson Beck the last 2 years. I'm on board with the head coach when he says that. But for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to go sixth-year Stetson over first-year Carson, okay? Your backfield, you lost Kenny McIntosh. You didn't have a pass-catching back, all right? You still had Kendall and Dejon. You had him last year. You dropped off there. You dropped off at receiver because of Ladd's injuries. When Ladd's in there, he's unbelievable. He's fantastic. If Ladd comes back, he's a 1,000-yard receiver and a Heisman guy next year. Ladd McConkey, folks, is unbelievable when he is healthy. And you saw that play. I mean, that play just knocked me back like, you've got to be kidding me. This guy's ridiculous. Unfortunately, he missed a lot of playing time, and he only played in 9 games. So you weren't as good there. You lost to Donnie Mitchell or Adonai Mitchell, however he's pronouncing it now. You lost him. Ra got hurt, didn't finish, right? Lovett wasn't the 1,000-yard receiver we thought he might be. You dropped off there. You dropped off at tight end because Brock missed 4 games. And when he came back, he was hurt. That's a drop. You dropped off on the offensive line. And I love me some Ernest Green. I'm a huge Ernest Green proponent. This kid, I found him out in California, and Georgia was recruiting him. I sat down with him half an hour. I love this guy. He's articulate. He's smart. He's brilliant. He's going to be fantastic. But Ernest Green, the redshirt freshman, was not as good as first-round Broderick Jones at left tackle. And Amarius Mims got hurt too and missed some time. So there was drop-off in every position group on offense from last year. And Mike Bobo still had this incredible third down percentage and still had Carson with the completion percentage record and still averaged 40 points a game in his first year with a first-year starting quarterback and all these injuries at receiver from week to week and a brutal schedule. As it turned out, Georgia's schedule actually did him in. And remember at the beginning, everybody said, oh, yeah, Georgia's got an easy schedule. Before the dust settled, that schedule did him in. I'm going to talk about that when I get to my third segment. My second segment, though, is coming up. And again, Jim Nagy's going to join us. He's the executive director of the Senior Bowl. We're going to talk to Jim about some of the Bulldogs that are going down there to Mobile, Alabama. And this All-Star game is a very big deal. The NFL, it's basically an in-person interview for the NFL. All the teams are there. All the coaches are there. And the players get to be coached by NFL staffs. I mean, it's really an incredible experience. We're looking forward. DawgNation will be there end of this month. Looking forward to that coverage. We do it every year. Georgia's got quite a presence there. But can't say enough about the Georgia Bulldogs and the way they handled that Orange Bowl, that preparation, that dedication, that commitment. I'll save my college football playoff thoughts for the final segment as well. Some pretty good football last night. Some things became really apparent with where Georgia fell short and why they weren't there. Again, we'll get into that. But what we saw from Georgia and the way they finished, to me, was a great moment in Georgia football history. 7 straight bowl wins for Kirby now. 20 straight wins for Kirby when he's got more than a week to prepare. 20 straight. That goes back to the Texas Sugar Bowl after the 2018 season. 7 straight top 10 finishes. I had a guy tell me today, I'm voting Georgia number 2 on the AP poll. They may finish 2. I'm more inclined to think 3, but they may finish 2. That's a heck of a season. That for a team that had all these injuries, that's a heck of a season. For a first-year starting quarterback, go look it up. See how many first-year starting quarterbacks in the SEC finished in the top 5. It's tough when you got to change quarterbacks. You lost your All-American middle linebacker at midseason. Your Butkus Award finalist, voted one of the 3 best linebackers in the nation the year before. You lost him half the season. Nobody even talks about that. Think about that. Georgia has had so many guys drafted and so much attrition, and here they are again in the championship mix year after year after year after year. It says everything about Kirby Smart. Huge. Some news breaks. You can check DawgNation.com on this. Julian Humphrey entering the transfer portal. I know everybody's ready for this to be over with, right? The whole portal, who's in the portal, who's not. I think Kirby's managed this well. Kirby said, hey, portal's not a bad thing. Portal's a good thing. Guys that aren't going to get on the field after 2 or 3 years, those guys need to go. He's a little disappointed when it's younger guys that haven't, given it a chance, that he hasn't had a chance to develop. But I think this has worked for Georgia. You got to have some natural attrition. You don't want a guy who's unhappy on your football team any more than you want somebody on your staff that's not happy with their job. It doesn't work. The best staffs have people that are motivated and growing. Same with the best teams. And that's what Georgia has. And if Julian Humphrey feels like he wants to measure some options somewhere else, then he didn't need to be a part of Georgia. And somebody else will be lined up for that roster spot because it is a valuable spot. It's hard. Listen, Georgia football is hard, man. It ain't for everybody. They really do push these guys harder than most places. Kirby said that. Eli Drinkwitz said that. Or no, excuse me, it wasn't Eli Drinkwitz. It was Matt Rule, the Nebraska coach, said. The NFL coaches came and said, man, you guys really get after it. The only place I've seen to get after it like this is Georgia. It's the Nebraska coach telling you that the NFL types are telling. Kirby's told us that, and you always hear Kirby, oh, well, yeah, sure, coach is going to say it. Somebody else is telling you that. The training these guys get here, this is why the Philadelphia Eagles drafted so many Georgia players. This is why. Because of the level of commitment that these guys have. Hold on. Checking my notes here. Because of the level of commitment, because of the training, because of the what? Now you're seeing every time you turn on the TV the other day, what did we see? We saw Zamir White go for 100 yards. We saw Swift jump somebody, get in the end zone. We saw James Cook you're starting to see Georgia guys all over the NFL now. It's happened. Kirby helped Nick Saban build that at Alabama with all the players he recruited and coached on defense. It's happening here now. The Kirby Smart culture is here. One final thought on Mike Norvell. He's worked very hard, and I give him kudos for turning Florida State around. He had some heavy lifting to do. He inherited a toxic program that was going down, a toxic powerhouse, and he has worked so hard to get that program where it's at. They're in the midst of building $135 million, $150 million football building, okay? This was a gut punch for him. There wasn't much Mike Norvell could do, but he will work on building a better culture. I'll tell you that. He will focus on that. And this will be something that Florida State can learn from, right? Just like Kirby did. Kirby had to learn from the Texas game. He brought a quarterback who said he was going in the portal. He brought him anyway. He brought a guy that was a first-round pick. The guy turned out to be a distraction. It worked against Georgia. Kirby said, you know what? From now on, only guys that are going to play. That's the way it was for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Hey, and he said, if you're not sure if you're going to play, then you probably don't need to be there, right? I'll tell you one thing I am sure about. I'm sure about Ingles. I'm sure about what I'm going to get every time I go to Ingles. I'm sure that I can rely on Ingles. You guys know that. We talk about that every Monday night, this week, Tuesday night, because of the championship playoffs last night. But we talk about this every week, about the service that we get, about the quality that we get. I want to take this moment. I want to recognize our sponsor, Ingles, once again. And when I come back, Jim Nagy is going to join me from the Senior Bowl. We're going to talk a lot more about the Georgia Bulldogs and other players in the SEC.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the sale.
Welcome back to the program. Mike Griffith here, about ready to talk about the Senior Bowl, which is going to be on February 3rd in Mobile, Alabama. You'll see it on TV. But leading up to the Senior Bowl, there's these practices, and these practices are really unique. And I'll bring our guest on, Jim Nagy, to talk about that. Jim, appreciate you joining the program. Can you share with people, and again, every year more and more dogs go, but for the people that don't know what the Senior Bowl is all about, give them a Crib Notes version of what these players have access to and the importance of it.
Yeah, Mike, good to be on. Good to see you again. It's a huge week for these. Can you hear me, Mike?
Yeah, I think your signal's freezing up a little bit, Jim. I'm not sure if we on our signal strength here. I can hear you now. Yeah.
No. All right. Is it better?
Well, I can hear your audio is fine, but your video, we're kind of going in slides here.
Oh man. Well, you caught me away from the office, man. I wasn't hanging around late tonight. I could try to go to a different part of the house to work on the signal if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I'll move up what I was going to talk about in the third segment to the second segment, and we'll bring you back here at about maybe 8:05. That gives you about 12 minutes to find a signal. So we'll bring you on for the third segment, and people know we're going to have our expert on. I look forward to getting Jim on. He knows I've asked him to come on every week because he's a fantastic guest, and he knows college football. He knows NFL. Jim was a scout with the Super Bowl teams in Seattle and in New England and in Green Bay. He was an actual NFL scout for all these Super Bowl teams. And so he had to go out and scout all these conferences, and he knows how to evaluate players like few other people. So what his game does is they go out and evaluate players that are sought after by NFL teams. And he knows how to, say, okay, this is a guy who projects. And he's in communication with all the NFL teams too. Sometimes they'll pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, what about so-and-so, right? And then it's his job to get those guys out in front of everyone. And this year, the Senior Bowl is kind of exciting because juniors are allowed to go as well as seniors. So it's going to be an absolute star-studded field. So fast forward now, we're going to kind of flip segments around. I want to talk about the college football playoffs, okay? And what happened last night. Michigan and Alabama, to me, was a sloppy slugfest. And I give both defenses credit for that. It's not like those offenses are just bad, okay? We know that because Alabama looked flawless against Georgia. Well, the difference was the Michigan front seven was able to disrupt that Alabama offensive line and put pressure on Jalen Milroe. And Milroe cracked. He made bad decisions. He fumbled in the open field. He was sacked 5 times, okay? Listen, this is the tough pill to swallow. Georgia's defensive front was not championship material this year, period. Not one individual, not a coach, not a scheme. They weren't good enough. That's why they weren't in the playoff, okay? They weren't good enough. And offensively, without a healthy Brock Bowers or a healthy Ladd McConkey, they couldn't compensate for their defense not being good enough. Now, we've gotten spoiled under Kirby Smart. His defenses are always good enough. If you look at run defense for Kirby, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, these guys are in the top 2 or 3 in the country in run. Not this year, all right? They weren't good enough. And Kirby told you that. He challenged his guys in the spring, and I know you all remember this because I talked about it. He said, we don't have the train wreckers and havoc makers that we have had before. They didn't. There was no Jalen Carter. There was no Jordan Davis. There's no Devontae Wyatt. There's no first-round pick on this defensive line coming out this year. They don't have it. Those guys didn't get there. Now, that's not to say they won't next year. That's not to say that Nazir Stackhouse couldn't have a bang-up off season and work himself into the first round like Devontae Wyatt did. That's not to say Warren Brinson couldn't. That's not to say that Big Baby won't develop into that. Jordan Hall or Christian Miller, that's not to say that it can't happen, but this year it didn't, and they weren't as good, okay? Nolan Smith was special. Chaz Chambliss did his job, but Nolan Smith was special, right? Michael Williams, will tell you, he didn't have the year he wanted to have. They didn't have championship depth at linebacker, all right? When Jamon Dumas-Johnson went out, C.J. Allen, awesome. This guy's probably a freshman All-American. I think Raylan Wilson was in, though. And it's 1st and 20 at the Georgia 28. and the freshman linebacker blows the coverage, and it's touchdown Alabama. You know what 1st and 20 means against the Georgia defense? 99 times out of 100? Bad things. 1st and 20 means very bad things against Georgia defense. But for Alabama, it meant a 28-yard touchdown pass on a broken assignment. Freshman backup. Frustrating. Didn't have championship depth there, right? Secondary was solid, strong. Didn't have the Chris Smith playmaker. I really thought Javon Bullard should come back. I really thought that Javon Bullard, as talented as he is, the game changer that he is, this guy's an All-American in my eyes. This guy could have been a Thorpe finalist. He's one of the premier safeties in the country, but he didn't have a great year. So he's going to be a second-day pick. He's going to go 2nd or 3rd round. He comes back, he could be a 1st rounder. We saw Lewis Sane do that, right? Same thing with Ladd. Ladd is, I can't say enough. I mean, I literally can't say enough how exciting of a player Ladd McConkey is. You know, you might tell me, hey, slow down here. I'm telling you Marshall Faulk. I'm telling you Reggie Bush. I'm telling you Christian McCaffrey. When Ladd gets in the open field and he's healthy, this cat is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Quick, fast. But he had a tough year. So now somebody's going to get Ladd McConkey for a bargain. They're going to get him in the 2nd or 3rd round because he didn't stay healthy all year, right? Remember that nonsense with Nakobe Dean? When he came out, it's the same thing. It's not fair. It's not supposed to be fair. It's, look, this guy's getting injured. Is he going to be healthy now? I don't know. Let's not use the 1st round on. Okay, it hurts your stock. What's Brock Bowers doing? Does it strike anybody as odd that Brock hasn't announced yet? Is there any sliver of, I just wonder, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but is there a sliver of a chance that Brock Bowers is? Because here's the thing. Now that there's NIL and now that there's payments, you can come back. It can make sense. Look, you can buy it. Well, what if they got an insurance policy? Okay, huge insurance policies. You buy insurance, you say, you know what? I could go pro and I could sign for this 3rd round money or this 2nd round money and this, whatever, $2.5 or $3 million signing bonus, of which I'll only get half of because of taxes. And then I'll have this contract worth, I don't know what, $700,000, $800,000 a year. Or I can stay another year and get paid by my school a ton of money with an insurance policy. And then next year have a signing bonus that's 3 or 4 times as much and a base salary that's 2 or 3 times as much, right? I did not jinx this, I promise. I see that Brock Bowers actually declared for the NFL, just as I was saying that. He must be watching. Sorry, Brock. I think Georgia fans were hoping. But there's other players that are sticking around that could have gone pro. Tate Ratledge is a great example. Here's a guy that could have gone in the 2nd or 3rd round. Tate Ratledge comes back. He's going to be in the Outland Trophy conversation next year. He's going to be a preseason All-American next year. And he's probably going to get some NIL money. So the point is, the way that college football has changed, and for the most part, most of it, I think a lot of us traditionalists, and like myself, we didn't want to see college football change. But I've learned from Kirby. I've learned from covering Kirby Smart. I learned from all the coaches that I've covered. Tom Izzo, Philip Fulmer, Bruce Pearl, Gene Stallings. You got to learn. I've learned from working with Spurrier. You've got to learn if you listen. And the thing that I learned from Kirby Smart is I don't waste time complaining about the rules. I don't waste time complaining about the structure, right? I control what I control. If there's a change made, there's no point in whining about it. Figure out a way to make it work for you, right? That's what Kirby does. He's efficient with his time and his effort. That's why he's so successful. He doesn't stomp and complain and whine. He says, all right, these are the rules. All right, here's how it's going to work. He's made this new NIL portal thing work for him. It's not the best for Georgia. It's really not. But he's found a way to make it work for Georgia, right? And I think fans need to see the glass half full. Now that you have NIL, it makes it more likely that guys will come back for another year. It gives you a chance for a guy like Tate Ratledge to come back for another year. It gives you a chance. There was a chance on Ladd McConkey. That was a very tough decision for Ladd McConkey. I know that it was. There was a chance, though. You had a shot. You had a shot at it, right? It gives you a chance to keep really talented players. Cedric Van Pran stuck around another year, okay? That was a big extra year for Ced. Without Cedric Van Pran, I don't think you finish 13-1. I think he's that much of a leader. And that's going to be the question now, is who are going to be the leaders next year? We got a whole off season to talk about that. And I can't wait to talk about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be a discussion. When you watch these guys like Trevor Etienne coming in, I can't wait for Etienne to get in. This guy is the most exciting back Georgia's had since DeAndre Swift. He's a game changer. He's a home run hitter from anywhere on the football field. Thought it was huge. Other guys coming back. Stackhouse, Brinson, huge. Can they be the next Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt? Mentioned Ratledge. Don't know what Truss is doing yet. Okay. Truss is a guy. If he can come back, he might want to do so, right? Because right now he's probably a free agent if he comes out. Lovett. Right now it looks like Lovett coming back. Now, these transfers that came in could transfer out again. There's a new rule that's been passed. I don't think Lovett's going to want to go back out. I just don't. I think Lovett realizes he's going to, now that he's been in the system a year and he understands how things work at Georgia, I think he's going to be a lot more effective. I think he's going to take the challenge. He's going to try for those 1,000 yards. He'd be the leading returning receiver, like the Colby Young guy from Miami. Big red zone target. The Vanderbilt guy, I need to see more of. I know he's a great prospect and he's talented, but he hasn't had more than 51 yards receiving in an SEC game. And let's see how he adjusts to the culture. It ain't easy. Not easy. Beck's coming back. Beck says he's got to take huge improvement. He does, because Beck didn't look as dynamic against Florida State as I thought he would. You might say, well, they were winning 42-3, but he missed on some throws. And I've seen Carson sharper before. I've seen Carson look better. Now some of that might have been, on the receivers. Again, hadn't had a whole lot of practice with Ladd or Bowers, throwing to different guys than he's used to. I think that's huge. And getting back to that comment I made earlier, I want to double down on this one more time. Any take that Mike Bobo was a drop-off from Todd Monken is just categorically wrong. Okay, and Todd Monken is a fantastic coordinator and a fantastic coach. I want to be clear on that. But you have to take into account that Bobo was working with a first-year starting quarterback. He was missing his top receivers half the year. McConkey missed the first 4 games. Bowers missed a few games and wasn't healthy. They didn't have a first-round left tackle. They had a redshirt freshman left tackle. There was more pressure this year. And they didn't have a guy like Kenny McIntosh coming out of the backfield that could catch passes. They still had Kendall and Dejon. Both of those guys were solid, and Kendall especially the second half of the year once he got healthy. I mean, he started to look like the runaway train he'd shown flashes of being throughout his career. But they didn't have that pass-catching weapon. So I think you need to take into account that there was drop-off in every position group from last year. And Bobo still they scored 24 points against Alabama. By the way, that's what Monken scored his first time twice against Alabama in Tuscaloosa in the next year, 24 points. And he didn't have a dominant defense on the other side. So that's my argument for the Mike Bobo people. I don't like hearing that criticism. I think it's short-sighted. I think it's low-hanging fruit. It's people that don't want to admit they were wrong, that were critical of the hire. They need to stop. Remember the first segment when we talked about the commitment level and how Georgia was different? That's the kind of stuff you got to clean up off social media, because it makes your fan base look fragmented. And Georgia's really isn't. It really isn't. And you can see it and you can feel it. And speaking of feeling it, you better make sure that your heating and cooling system is working well, because things are about to get cold here in Georgia. I want to take this break right now. When we come back, I'm going to do a who's hot segment with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl. And it's going to be brought to you by Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing.
Want to make sure your family stays comfortable all year long? Our family of trained comfort specialists are available anytime to service or repair your system. Or it may be time to replace your old units with a new Trane HVAC system.
We are a locally owned family business, and we carefully select the technicians who we send into your home.
At Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, we are large enough to handle all of your HVAC and plumbing needs,
but small enough to care.
Call today to take advantage of our 3-visit annual maintenance plan.
Welcome back to the program, and Jim Nagy joins us now. Jim, thanks so much. I appreciate you coming back. And when we last left, we were talking about the Senior Bowl. And again, I'll let you give the Crib Notes version. Now, some people say, well, this is just an all-star game. No. This is so much, much more. If you can give the Crib Notes version of why this event is so important and how it works, I'd really appreciate it. I know our audience would too.
Yeah, Mike, thanks again. Am I better now? Is the video better? Is the
Outstanding.
audio?
Outstanding.
Yeah, first off, I mean, the Georgia fan base is lucky to have you. Just listening to you, like, comment on your team and following you, like, man, you're I mean, not every fan base has someone like you. This Georgia fan base is lucky. But with the Senior Bowl, you've been a bunch of times. You used to be down here, but no, it's a huge showcase for these players. It's a huge work week for the NFL. So my background, I was in the NFL for 20 years before taking this job, and this was always the week that we look forward to the most. I mean, more so than the combine. I look back on my time in the NFL, and I feel like the mistakes I made and the mistakes the teams I worked for made usually came from, just putting too much stock into what happens when these guys are in shorts and t-shirts. So, the Senior Bowl is real football. The whole NFL community's down here. I think we credentialed close to 1,000 NFL people last year. Over 1,100 media members. It's on practices on NFL Network and ESPN. And more than anything, I just got off the phone with a Power 5, kind of a major program player this evening. And he was saying, Jim, the scouts have been through my school. Like, they've seen me. And the difference is, I said, yeah, the scouts have seen you. And I was a scout. So I'm not trying to disparage the scouting community. Those are my people. But there's a difference between scouts being on board with you and going through the school and knowing you and seeing your games, as opposed to the guys that are going to be making the picks in April. That's a huge difference. When you get GMs and head coaches and position coaches and coordinators on board throughout the process, it's huge. And this is the one time they get a chance to really be around these players in a relaxed setting. The combine's very corporate. You don't get very much time with the players at all at the combine. And sure, they can get on a plane and go down to Athens, but when they do that, like, they're bouncing around from player to player. There's a lot of good players.
Looks like we lost Jim's signal there. Something happened. He cut out. And he's right. The in-person opportunity is what makes it unique. These players get coached by NFL staffs that are down there. There's 2 NFL staffs that are down there, and they get coached by these staffs. So they get the FaceTime. They get that first person. They get to see how quickly this guy picks up the offense. They get to see how easily this guy handles hard coaching. Obviously, for Georgia players, they're a dream. They get it, right? Kirby's tough on them. The Georgia guys always say, yeah, we do all this stuff at Georgia. We know what it takes because we do this at Georgia. Georgia, the practices are actually harder. So the in-person stuff, as Jim was talking about, is invaluable. And Jim's back, but before he speaks, I want to share a quick story about Jim. And I didn't tell Jim I was going to tell this story. But the Senior Bowl goes both ways, right? On the one hand, all these players go down to Mobile, Alabama. It's a tremendous showcase, and it's fantastic television. Fans go down there. They get all these autographs. And you might say, well, that's great for the Senior Bowl. Well, listen, folks, that I was in Kenny McIntosh's house last year. And as Kenny was falling down the draft board, I was shocked because I think Kenny McIntosh is a fantastic back. He had actually worked himself up to second string in fall camp in Seattle before he got injured. Jim made a call. Jim knows the people in the NFL, and he made that call, and he was able to make that call because he was around Kenny McIntosh, because he met him. He saw him. He watched him sign all those autographs for the fans. He watched him go through those drills, and he called the guy up, and he said, hey, we had this guy rated higher than the guy you drafted earlier. And this is an old friend because Jim is connected, right? The Seahawks. That was, one of your 3 Super Bowl teams? Is that right, Jim?
Yeah, no, that did happen. John Schneider is a good friend of mine, probably my best friend in football, actually. And you're talking about Zach Charbonnet, who they took in the second round. So, I called John in the middle of day 3. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what's happening to Kenny? And really what it was the testing part of it. He didn't have a great pro day. He didn't have the testing numbers that a lot of teams want to see from running backs. It had nothing to do with the football. The football part was great. Unfortunately, a lot of these teams get scared off by the testing part. Like I said, the mistakes we make, as personnel guys, we put too much stock into what happens in shorts and t-shirts. So I said, John, frankly, man, like, Kenny McIntosh was our number 1 rated senior back, ahead of the guy that you drafted in the second round. And that doesn't mean we're right. But we're not going to be that far off. So, luckily Seattle, and again, I'm not saying this is why they drafted him by any means. They liked him, or they wouldn't have drafted him. But no, you're right, Mike. I mean, that's something I do try to bring to our players. I mean, just my 20 years in the league and those relationships. I get a vested interest in these players, and they come down to Mobile and do a great job. I want to have their back. So
yeah, Mark Webb was another guy that's draft stock was not real high before he went down to the Senior Bowl, and then you put him out there playing football in drill work, safety and corner, and NFL teams go, oh, this guy can really do some things, because now he's not just coming in certain packages. They're getting to move these guys around and isolate them against other elite guys that are rated highly. And it can work both ways. Sometimes a guy, maybe he's masked because he's part of a really elite unit. I remember way back in the day, I won't mention the team, but there was a center who wasn't particularly good, but he was on a championship team. He got down there, got into one-on-ones, got exposed a little bit. That's not going to happen with Georgia guys, though, because they practice against NFL guys every day. They're practicing against guys in Athens that are better than 90% of the people they're going to go up against in the Senior Bowl. And that's why I'm so confused whenever guys turn down opportunities to go there, because you've already practiced against the best. You're going to have an opportunity to showcase that. The good news is there are more Georgia guys going there. My last list, and I'm excited about getting to see Ladd McConkey again. You might have missed the part of the program where I was complaining that he's not coming back to Georgia, Jim, because Ladd McConkey is this guy is an unbelievable talent. He's a cheat code. He's a Marshall. This guy's a 1,500-yard receiver. He's going to put on one hell of a show at the Senior Bowl. I'm going to tell you that. He's going to be there. Van Pran's going to be there. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, he's going to be there. Tyke Smith's going to be there. Jim, have I covered all the ground? Is that where we're at right now, those the four?
We've got a long snapper. Yeah, and we've got and there was one other. We got a junior on board today who will remain nameless per NFL league rules. We cannot announce any of the juniors until a week from today. So we will. We're having a Senior Bowl roster reveal special on the NFL Network next Tuesday night, and that Georgia junior will be among probably 20 to 25 really good juniors. This is our first year we can add underclassmen. So we just added him to the list today, and it's going to be a great group. So this will be, I tell people in Mobile when I do the local media stuff, this will be far and away our most talented Senior Bowl we've ever had because of this junior thing. And the average fan might not understand it. The NFL certainly will. I don't expect the average fan to. I mean, it's really hard to keep track of this stuff if you're not like watching these guys. And everyone has real jobs, right? Like they're not watching tape like NFL people are, but it's going to be exciting. We're excited about all these Georgia players. If you want, we can go through each guy, but no, it's going to be a great week. And it's a small class at Georgia, like they did a really good job. I mean, Carson Beck's going back. Nazir Stackhouse is going back. Warren Brinson's going back. I mean, Ratledge is going back. I mean, they have good players returning to that football team. So, and we're not done. I heard you talking about the running backs, and Kendall Milton, certainly the second half of the year played great once he got healthy. I think the durability thing is a question in teams' minds, but he's going to be in the mix. I mean, right now we're trying to work through some of this junior stuff. It's kind of uncharted waters for us. Again, all these guys are trying to figure out if they're coming out right now. And so we're kind of waiting and seeing on some of these juniors. And if that falls through, we might have a spot for Kendall. So, Kirby hit me up about Kendall about 3 weeks ago and just said, hey, Jim, like this guy's healthy now. Watch the late stuff on him. And we did. And he's like, I heard you use the freight train analogy. I mean, he's a big guy. You get him going downhill. He's a load. So, and we all saw that in the Orange Bowl the other night. So we might not be done. We might not be done with the Bulldogs.
High ceiling guy. I know if you did a fan poll, Jim, you would be overrun with Georgia fans on Kendall Milton. Just a high character guy. And again, there's a lot of competition for these spots for sure. I want to ask one quick question before we go down the list of the Georgia guys that are going to be there and kind of get your thoughts on, where they're at and what they need to prove, maybe some draft stock. The opt-in versus the opt-out. You've been a scout. The times are changing. Does it add some value? I know it doesn't necessarily get held against the guy when he opts out, but does it add a value when you go, wow, Cedric Van Pran, man, that guy stepped up and encouraged everybody to play for his teammates? Because it looks to me in the NFL, and I gave Michael Pittman as an example earlier, that guy took a vicious shot a couple of weeks ago. For all rights and purposes, he could have shut down for a couple more weeks after a hit like that. He's back out there trying to help the Colts win, though. And part of me goes, is that the same mentality at work here? Guys that love football, that feel that sense of commitment. Is that part of the psychological evaluation? And how much value is there to the Georgia guys in the culture that Kirby's built? Does that add value to the Dogs?
Yeah, there's certainly it adds value. I think the league is past knocking players that opt out. I don't think they're holding that against them. I mean, it was only whatever that was, 8-9 years ago, where Christian McCaffrey was the first guy to do it. And I was sitting in the draft room in Seattle, and there was some choice words for Christian McCaffrey. We couldn't believe he was doing it. We're like, what's this kid doing? And now we're to the point where the league totally understands when guys opt out. But I do think it helps the guys that decide to play. And again, it's like coming to the Senior Bowl. These guys aren't just being evaluated for this year's draft. They're being evaluated on that next contract, right? It's so like the hardest part for a team is the guy goes through the first 4 years, 5 years on a deal, and they pay those guys well, but they're not making life-changing money at that point. You're not making 8-9 figures on these contracts. So they want to find guys that love football. They want to find guys that really want to compete. And when you got a guy like Cedric Van Pran who didn't have to play in that bowl game, he could have easily opted out. He's going to be one of the top centers drafted. I think it's going to be like him, Graham Barton from Duke, who played left tackle at Duke, who'll be at the Senior Bowl, Zach Frazier from West Virginia, who'll be at the Senior Bowl. He's going to be one of the top guys. So he didn't have to play in that game, but it's the second contract. Like teams do that. They go back. Like, what was this guy coming out? Like, how was he wired coming out? Did he compete every time he had a chance to compete? Because it's human nature. Once you make generational, like life-changing money, I think everyone's reaction is to take your foot off the gas a little bit and relax. And what these guys want, what these teams want is a guy you pay them and they push the pedal to the metal. They keep the pedal down and they play the next 4 or 5 years at an all-pro level. That's what you're paying them to do. And I think when you see a window, you look for little windows into a guy's true makeup and his true character. And I think a lot of like this whole process from bowl game through the pre-draft process, these guys kind of show themselves. If you really look closely, you can see patterns of how guys are wired. And so, yeah, like bringing it back to Cedric and all these guys that played in that bowl game, I think it only helps them.
And let's start with Cedric. So, Jim, where does a number 1 or a number 2 center fall in the draft? Where could Cedric go, and what are some of the things that he's going to want to do at the Senior Bowl to show the NFL scouts?
Yeah, those guys usually start coming up somewhere in the second round. It's rare nowadays. I mean, Ryan Kelly went to the Colts out of Alabama a few years ago, whatever that was, 7-8 years ago. He went in the middle of the first. But even a guy like Creed Humphrey, who was in the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago and is an all-pro player now, in a short career. I mean, Creed's a stud, and he went like in the 50s, I want to say, somewhere off the top of my head. So they start that middle of the second. You're looking to draft starters in the first 3 rounds. So usually if you've got a starting level center, like they'll go in the third. Again, so that's where I think he's at. I think Ced's probably safely in the third round. Could he play his way up into the second? Sure he can. And I think for the centers, it's like the position versatility thing isn't that big of a deal because you're going to be drafting Cedric to be your starting center. Like if you were drafting him to be a backup, you would want him to play guard as well. I don't think Cedric has to worry about playing too much guard. It certainly helps in a pinch if you need to move over, at the next level. But I think where he's got to show is teams are really going to want to get him on the board, just like a quarterback. I mean, the centers get interviewed very similarly to the quarterbacks. I mean, he's going to have to answer, all the different IDs and identify, the identifications, the different, changing protections and helping the quarterback. And just, again, if he gets drafted by a team with a young quarterback and he's the starting center, I don't care if he's a rookie or a vet, like he's going to be expected to help out. You have to help that rookie quarterback. So the interview part will be huge. And again, you want to say that Cedric's went against all these great defensive linemen in the SEC. And if you're going to find them, they are from the SEC. But quite frankly, this year's SEC group, there wasn't a lot of great pass rushing defensive tackles. So he's going to see a couple really good pass rushing defensive tackles. And teams are just going to want to see if he can stay in front of them. Bottom line, can he move his feet laterally and stay in front of guys in pass protection? Because he's a big, strong guy. He's got good mobility in the run game. So yeah, he's a clean prospect, man. I mean, I've met him a couple times at the SEC Media Days. I want to say he's been there at least a couple times with you, Mike. You guys maybe caravan from Athens together, but he'll do a great job. He's got a great head on his shoulders, very mature. I think he's going to crush this process.
Yeah, I do too. Said's 21, 22 going on 30, man. This guy's a pro already. I'm going to go to Marcus Rosemy-Jake Saint. You know, maybe one of the more underappreciated players. You know, we all think about receivers and catches, and MRJ can certainly do that. But talk to his strengths and some of the opportunities that he's going to have down there in Mobile as well.
He is a really cool football player, Mike. And I give your fan base a lot of credit. They recognize that. When we announced Jack saying a few days ago, it was amazing in the comments. Your fan base understood the blocking. They understood the dependability with the hands. They understood the special teams part of it. Again, where he's projected to go, like he's a day 3 guy for sure. If you asked anyone outside the Georgia fan base who Marcus is, they wouldn't know who he is. But I think your fan base has an appreciation, and I think you know, the NFL has an appreciation. So you know, we don't make these selections unless I vet these guys out. Especially, you know, Marcus has taken a spot. I had to reserve about 6 or 7 spots for junior receivers. And right now they're not coming out. I mean, there's like the 2 guys from LSU, I think, declared today, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, but there's some junior receivers that have chosen to stay in. So that's why we pulled the trigger on Marcus. But I vetted him out to guys in the league. Like, what do you think if we had, and I sent like 3 names to him, you know, this guy, or that guy. And Marcus is a guy's like, he's like, Jim, the kid's a stud. Like, we'd love to have him down there. Like, kind of don't want you to invite him because we want him to keep flying under radars. You bring him to Mobile, it's going to expose him a little bit. But he's everything you're looking for in a day 3 receiver. He's tough, dependable. His hands are incredible. When you throw it to him, he makes the play. I mean, that's the thing in the NFL. You're not going to get a lot of opportunities as a, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th receiver. So when they do it, throw it to you, you better catch it. And he's got phenomenal catch skills. And then he blocks his tail off. He's played on special teams. He's a high character guy. His dad actually texted me the other night and thanked me for inviting his son, which I don't ever expect it, but families rarely do that. I do not expect it at all, but it's really cool to hear that every once in a while. So no, man, he's a fun player. He and Jordan Whittington from Texas are the 2 receivers in this class that are more like day 3 type of players that we invited. Like middle round guys, but both are like off the charts intangible guys that every NFL team would want.
Yep. And certainly he is a guy that loves football as well. And excited about Marcus Rosemy-Jake Saint being there, excited about Cedric Van Pran being there, excited about Tyke Smith being there. Another guy who's going to have to prove himself in other capacities. He was kind of the star player for the Bulldogs this year. If you looked at how Tyke handled himself, I thought he handled himself really well. Made some plays, you know, and this was a guy that transferred a few years ago from West Virginia, and really the first year, you know, had the injury with the foot, really didn't make the sort of impact that I think Georgia thought he was going to make. But this year he was a big time player. He was a playmaker for the Dogs. And I said it earlier. I said that I thought that every offensive position went down a level. I thought the defensive positions went down on the D-line, linebacker. I thought the secondary was the only place where I would say it held its own. And that's a compliment because Keely Ringo was quite a playmaker, and so was Chris Smith. But Tyke Smith was the reason why we could say that the secondary didn't drop off. I mean, when you're that special, when you're that good, when you're winning 29 games in a row, which is what Georgia did, which is just unbelievable, everybody's good. So for Tyke to come in and make an impact this year to the point where he gets a Senior Bowl invite, Jim, you know, I'm not going to say I was surprised he got the invite. I was pleased he got the invite because it was only really 1 full year. But what does Tyke bring, and what are people going to want to see from him down there in Mobile?
Yeah, sorry for the technical difficulties, Mike.
No problem.
I get a phone call, it's dropping me off this podcast. So apologies for that. But no, Tyke's kind of in a similar vein that we just talked about Marcus. He's an underappreciated guy, probably in the whole draft space, you know, in terms of the media. He's just a really good football player. He's done a great job at that star position for Georgia, which is really a critical place in Kirby's defense. I think Georgia fans know that by now. You have to have a guy in there that is really smart, who can communicate, who's tough and can tackle. I mean, there's a huge run support role to that position that I don't think a lot of fans, they think DB, they think you're just out there covering people. But when you're in that role in the slot, like you got to be able to, you're a big fitter and run support. So he's really tough, and it's not just the toughness. He's a good tackler. He gets people on the ground. We're going to play him at some safety during the week. I think that's going to really help him. He's similar to Jalen Petrie, who we had in the game a few years ago from Baylor, who's a stud right now for the Houston Texans. See him as a similar player, and you know, Petrie played a similar position in Baylor's offense and came down to the Senior Bowl and blew it out in coverage, and we're playing him deep. So I think, you know, Tyke's going to do a lot of that, and when he's in position to make plays on the ball, he makes plays on the ball. So he's just a really cool football player. Again, I think he's more of a day 3 guy.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to be a guy that will end up being a really good pro. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he starts for a team, because he's just, I think he's going to have some safety flexibility, some nickel flexibility. Everybody's looking for that nickel free safety guy. And I think Tyke can do that. Like, I don't know what the combine's going to be like for him. I don't know how fast he's going to run. I don't know any of that. I know there's some questions to the speed and everything like that. But he's one of those guys, the more you watch him on tape, the more you like him. His game certainly grows on you. It did me.
You know, it does. Now a day 2 guy that I think has day 1 talent, Ladd McConkey. Like I said, I think this guy's going to absolutely be the star. You know, you had that running back from Tulane last year that really lit it up. Ladd is that on steroids. I mean, and a personable guy. There's going to be a lot of autographs. A lot of people are going to want to meet Ladd McConkey. I know you guys are going to put him behind a microphone. He could run for governor. I mean, this kid is special. This is a really special guy, Jim. First of all, I guess I just ask you about your thoughts on Ladd's ceiling. I mean, he's had some injuries, but if Ladd runs that high 4.3, and I don't know that he does, he may be quicker than he is fast. I don't think I've ever seen him get caught from behind. That said, when he's healthy, I'll let you. You're the pro scout. Who's your comp for him, and what are your thoughts on Ladd McConkey?
Yeah, Ladd's an easy guy to like. He was our second graded senior wideout over the summer behind Roma Dunze for Washington.
Wow.
What we think of him. So really good player. I think he is fast, Mike. I would not be surprised if he touches in the 4.3s. I think you saw it the other night on that double pass where he turned that in. I mean, you don't do that being a quicker than fast guy. That kid's got wheels. So he can get deep. I think the biggest thing on junior tape, like the one knock, Mike, was, and if Georgia fans remember, he got loose on a bunch of deep balls a year ago, and Stetson hit him, and he had some drops. He had some critical down the field drops, and you know, this year when he was out there and healthy, had a really good year. But the injury thing, you know, kept him out some. I was at the Auburn game where he came back, so it's kind of cool to see him out there for the first time. But he's quick and fast. Again, like, you hate to do the white guy on white guy, like lazy comparison thing, but there is some Cooper Kupp to him. You know, I think he's faster than Cooper Kupp. But in terms of a route runner, getting in and out of breaks and, you know, just stemming guys and setting guys up and having a feel for working open space, like, he can do that. And he can run after the catch. And those are all things Cooper has been ridiculous at. I mean, think of 2 years ago, Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown, you know, in receiving yards, receptions, and touchdown catches. I mean, Jerry Rice, maybe the last guy that did that. I don't know. But so when I make a Cooper Kupp comparison, like, I'm not doing that lightly, and I'm not doing it because it's one white guy and another white guy. They do have a similar skill set. So yeah, the durability thing will come into question. Teams will want to, you know, they'll dive into that. But again, I'm just strict tape evaluation. He's got a chance to be a number 1 receiver for any team.
Wow, could be a first-round pick. You didn't say that. I said that. We'll see. The Senior Bowl is going to be a prime-time opportunity. Jim, before I let you go, there were a couple games last night. I'd love to get your take. Guys that stood out. A couple senior quarterbacks. I forgive me for not knowing the Senior Bowl roster by heart, but, man, Michael Penix is the guy I keep looking at, man. What do you think about Penix? I guess J.J. McCarthy is a guy that could project in the NFL. Who are the Senior Bowl quarterbacks at the moment that have been announced, and what do you think of those 2 guys?
Yeah, at the moment we've got Spencer Rattler, keeping in the Rattler from South Carolina, Joe Milton from Tennessee. We've got Michael Pratt from Tulane. We've got a big announcement tomorrow. I'll just say this: those 3 guys that were in New York for the Heisman, we have commitments from 2 of those 3 guys. You don't want to They don't want us to announce that just yet, so we're going to wait on that. And JJ McCarthy will certainly be a guy that's in the mix for us if he comes out, because we can get the juniors now. So he would be a big one for us. And again, I think the Senior Bowl makes sense for all those guys, because right now they're really jockeying for the third spot behind Caleb Williams and Drake May. So, if you're, like I said, we get back to the competitive part. If you're really a competitor and you want to show these teams what you're built of, like if you're really fighting for the third spot, why would you not come down and take advantage of a week around these decision makers? And again, who knows? Maybe you surpass one of those two other guys.
Yeah.
To Michael Penix, he was ridiculous last night. Made a massive jump from last year. He was Senior Bowl eligible last year. We did not invite him. And again, that's not just our evaluation. I mean, we include the NFL in that too. So we're talking about a guy that was probably a 6th round pick a year ago, who has moved himself up quite a bit. So there are, like Ladd McConkey, there's some injury durability stuff that needs to be worked through. I think people are knocking him for his age. I don't think the league cares too much about the age thing. We saw Hendon Hooker go in the 3rd round with a torn ACL last year, and he was 25 years old. So I don't think the league cares about the age thing. It's more the durability part. But man, he's had a phenomenal year, and last night was incredible.
It was, and he is such a character guy. I got to tell you, he is such a high character guy, and I keep going back to that because I really feel like it translates. And take it another step for me, because I know you've got a bunch of football fans on, and yeah, you saw it from a scout's angle, but you're a football guy, just purebred football guy, Jim. What was your breakdown of those games of what we saw happen last night? Michigan, Alabama, and Washington, Texas.
Well, the Michigan-Bama one was hard for me because I'm a Michigan grad and my wife's a Bama grad. So we were that was just a great football game. That's all I wanted. Michigan stumbled the last couple of years. I just wanted it to be a good game. I didn't want, Georgia blew them out a couple of years ago. They lose to TCU last year. So I was just hoping it was a good competitive game. And then once we got to halftime and we were still in it, I was like, all right, let's go win this thing. But I thought Michigan dominated the first half. It was too bad they weren't up more. Then I felt like Alabama came out of the locker room and really took control of it. And then Michigan made the plays down the stretch when they needed to make them. The hard part was the special teams. I mean, God, it would have been all about the miscues in the kicking game. So if they can clean that up, I think this should be a really good game. And then the Washington-Texas game, I thought Texas might have had a little advantage in the trenches. Just that D line at Texas is as close to an SEC defensive line, and then frankly more talented than any SEC defensive line this year. They got two guys, Sweat and Murphy, on the inside that are both coming to the Senior Bowl. That'll be top 50 draft picks, could be first rounders. And they've got Alfred Collins, who's going to stay another year. If he came out this year, he'd be a second rounder. They're loaded. So I thought that might be a little advantage for Texas, but credit Washington and all those playmakers. Michigan's going to have a hard time scoring with that Washington team, but Michigan, man, that team seems like they're on a mission, Mike. I'll say that. Like those kids are, they have bonded together over all this Jim Harbaugh stuff over the year. Just talking to everyone I know in Ann Arbor, like that. This is as close a team as you will find, and that's scary. You get a team that's this in it with it for each other. They just kind of seem like they're I don't know, man. There's a level of investment there that you don't hear a lot. So it should be a great game. I'm looking forward to it.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this, Jim. You're on a Georgia program, and people are going to want to know what you think about Brock Bowers, and they're also going to know what you think about what Georgia might have, could have, would have. And we don't often play the what-if game, but you had an opportunity to see Georgia at full strength with Ladd and Brock when they were in the game and when Carson had some weapons. I mean, was Georgia a team that had the juice to win a national title with a little bit of luck staying healthy? And what do you expect to see from Brock Bowers in the NFL?
Yeah, for sure they did, Mike. No, that doesn't take a NFL scout. Your fan base knows. I mean, that they could have beaten anybody on any given day. There's no question about it. Unfortunately, they didn't play their best game against Alabama, and Alabama rose up and played their best game. So again, it's unfortunate how it all worked out. A good thing after next year, we'll get into the expanded playoff and it won't be an issue. But no, they're a great team. Brock Bowers, it'll be really exciting what he can be as a pro. I think that again, you can label Brock whatever you want. I've heard some bad narratives out there in the draft media so far that they comparisons to like Kyle Pitts and that he's like an F tight end. you guys have seen this kid block. Like, he'll put his face on you. He's tough. Like, he's not like some of these guys are glorified receivers coming out of college. Like, I don't think that's Brock Bowers. I think he's an all-around football player. He's a weapon. You guys have done a great job using him in like the jet sweep game and some of that stuff. He's got that running back background in high school. You get him with a creative coordinator. I mean, it's not going to happen. I would love to see him go to like Kyle Shanahan or somebody like that really, I mean, God bless the league if that ever happened. But he's just such a weapon and such a great player. And I was at the South Carolina game, his true freshman year. I brought my son up there for a game when he was in high school. His junior year, we went to a game up there, and that kid was ready to go to the NFL as a true freshman. I've seen too many players physically that and he would have been a first rounder 2 years ago, but he would have been drafted as a true freshman. There's no question about it. So I hope he lands in a good spot, somewhere that uses him well. He's a no-brainer. Like, I know everyone up there loves him, and he's a high character guy. I haven't dug in too deep, but whoever picks him is going to get a special player.
He's a special guy. Yeah, looking forward to Brock Bowers. Looking forward to all these Georgia guys, and for a lot of them, the journey goes to the Senior Bowl. Some magic's happened there. Devontae Wyatt turned himself into a first rounder at the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago with an outstanding camp. We mentioned Mark Webb and Kenny McIntosh. If he doesn't go to the Senior Bowl, probably not getting drafted. It's helped so many guys, and I know fans. It's a hard connect, but Georgia, as they've gotten better and better, and they've started to permeate the NFL, and they really look closely at this process. Yeah, we get the combine, but now what is this Senior Bowl thing? And we're going to try to bring you a lot of coverage and video of that. Jim does a great job with the access down there, and I know that those Georgia players we mentioned that are going to be there, they all like to do interviews. They're all comfortable in front of the camera. Can't wait to find out who this junior is. You're saying now, according to the rules, you cannot promote this on social media or announce a junior. They just show up there, right?
Not till January 9th. So a week from today, we'll announce all the juniors. So it's going to be a big push. It'll be on the NFL Network a week from tonight. I think it's at 10 o'clock Eastern time. But yeah, it's going to be a big push. It's a big year for us, getting these underclassmen. There's some really big names, and we still got a week to add some. So I mean, again, there's going to be 20, 25 juniors, a bunch of first, second, third round picks. We're really not taking any juniors that aren't in that range. If we're gonna bring juniors, they might as well be really good ones. If we're bringing fifth and sixth round guys to the Senior Bowl, we're gonna bring the seniors. We're gonna bring guys like Marcus Rosemy-Jack-Saint, guys that really earned it over 4 years.
Yep. And I'll keep an ear. I think I know who it is. I'm excited if it's who I think it is. And I'll keep dropping little notes on Kendall Milton to you, Jim. I think I can't help it. This guy's been here 4 years. He's won a lot of people over. And after that game, I swear to you, it wasn't 30 minutes after that game, and he gets asked about the Orange Bowl. He says, I'm not going to abandon my brothers. I've been through hell and back. I'm not giving up an opportunity. And then he goes out there and wins MVP in one half a play. Pretty impressive young man, and a ceiling that I think is really high. So we'll see. I know you've got a lot of other really deserving guys. Every team has guys, believe me, folks, they are fighting to get in. There was a coach, and he went on national television and called out Jim because his running back, I'm like, wait a minute. It's one thing to pick up the phone. You're going to go on television and lobby for this guy? That's how competitive these coaches are, fighting for their players. And it doesn't surprise me to hear that Kirby Smart has done everything he can for these Bulldogs with Jim. And Jim's got an eye for Georgia. He comes up to Georgia a lot. And you told me, Jim, you've been impressed with how this culture's grown here.
Yeah, it's been fun watching Kirby get it done. I knew him back at Alabama and was in there all the time. So to see it take shape, and it didn't happen overnight. You know that. You were on the program. It didn't happen overnight. There were some people bucking it, but no, they're bought in. It's so competitive. The NFL knows what they're getting from those guys. It got called out on ESPN the other night but again, it was Coach Drinkwitz, and he didn't do that. We've been going back and forth about Cody Schrader for a long time, and again, Cody Schrader. Think about that. I mean, you bring up Kendall, and I'm not trying to stay on too long, but you like Kendall Milton for sure. But we've got 8 running back spots. There's 132 FBS schools, and then there's countless other Cody Schrader led the SEC in rushing. He had 1,600 yards. Didn't have an invite until a few nights ago when Drink got on TV. But no, we were. So it is. It's very competitive. If the guys don't get an invite, it's not because we don't like them. I mean, Kendall Milton, I think he's a draft pick. If I were GM, I'd draft him. I think he's going to have a good NFL career. But when you're trying to pick 8 running backs over the entirety of college football, it's hard. It's hard.
It's tough. Especially with juniors. Jim, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it, man. I look forward to working closely with you the rest of this month. I'll be down there at the Senior Bowl. Kaylee Manziel, I think, will be down there with me as well. We'll be doing stories. We'll be doing interviews. People can follow you. What's your Twitter handle, Jim?
Yeah, it's at Jim Nagy _SB. So I've been on there for a while now. It's still weird for me after all these years. I'm still not I don't love the social media thing, but it's been fun. It's a good way to promote these players and really pump the draft process. So
no, you don't understand, Jim. We love your Twitter because Jim will get after people. He does not take crap on Twitter. He's one of those guys when you go, he probably shouldn't have, but you're glad that he did because somebody needed to say it. So it's an awesome Twitter account. It's fun to follow. You're always great in all your interviews, whether it's with us, ESPN, On3. Really appreciate you, Jim. Jim, thank you for joining us tonight on the Ingles on the Beat show. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl Executive Director. That's going to do it for us this week. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Don't forget, tomorrow morning, Brandon Adams, DawgNation Daily. Wednesday night, it's Jeff Santel Before the Hedges. You got Connor Riley every Sunday. And Kaylee Manziel, we'll see her pop up at the Senior Bowl, and we've seen her on the Jittery Joe's kickoff shows this year on Saturdays. And just all sorts of great stuff from DawgNation. I'm falling all over myself because there's so much stuff that we've got going on, and I'm trying to cover all the bases. But if you go to DawgNation.com and you go to our Facebook page and our YouTube page, you're going to see content all week long as we continue to cover everything Georgia related and college football related. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thanks for the production tonight, Kaylee, and I will